Hello everyone. Welcome to this digital learning platform of Department of Collegiate Education. Friends, you can see a picture with a path which has an end. The end is visible, but as you walk ahead, the end also walks with you and it goes farther and farther. Similar is the path of learning in life, that as we walk in the path of learning, it moves farther and farther, and we have a lot to learn. Yeah. So there are many who went in search of that path of learning, and we do go in search of knowledge in the path of learning. And one such example of searching the path of learning, searching the source of learning, is there in Mathew Arnold's poems too. That is in the poem The Scholar Gipsy. Dear friends, today in this video, we'll make a discussion of Mathew Arnold's poem The Scholar Gipsy, an explanation of the poem in part first today. So before going to the discussion of the poem, we need to understand some terms like Romantic era, Victorian age. Yeah, when we come to the term Romantic age in English literature, roughly we locate it between 1798 with the publication of William Wordsworth and Coleridge's the preface to lyrical ballads, poems in lyrical ballads, until the end of uh, Queen Victoria's reign started in 1837. And when the Queen Victoria took the power of English throne in 1837, the Victorian age in English literature started, and it lasted till 1901. So, one thing is clear that the Victorian age in English literature has the background of as the Romantic age. So, some of the basic tenets of Romantic age were still continuing in the Victorian age too, like the Romantics' concept of imagination, the Romantics' concern for nature, the Romantics' tone of melancholy or melancholic view of life. These were evident in the Victorian poetry, which was produced between 1837 to 1901. When come to Mathew Arnold as a poet, he is one such writer who carried that romantic spirit in the Victorian age. We certainly see in Arnold that concern for nature, that prize and appreciation of the natural elements against the materialistic Victorian society, and also a tone which is elegiac and a very melancholic also. A criticism of the present materialistic life was evident in his poem. He was a moralist in approach too. That was his quality as a poet. And when we think of his biography and all that, which has already been introduced while discussing the poem Dover Beach, he was born in 1822 and died out of cardiac arrest, heart failure in 1888. He was an English poet, an cultural critic, an essayist, uh, was a son of Thomas Arnold, who was the headmaster of a famous school named Rugby School in Oxford. And Matthew Arnold was also a student of the same school. And it is important to note here that as a student at Rugby School, he wrote a poem and won a prize for that also. Later on, he also became an inspector of schools. That was his profession later, inspector of schools. Then became excellent writer in poetry, literary and social religious criticism, His notable works are the best poems written by him are Dover Beach, the Scholar Gipsy, Tharsis, and he's also famous for his collection of essays written in cultural criticism written in Culture and Anarchy, Literature and Dogma. These are some of the biographical aspects where we find a giant literary figure of English literature, that is Mathew Arnold. Yeah, some terms which are important to understand this poem are elegy. What's an elegy? In simple, elegy is a sad song that mounts over the depth of someone or loss of something. So it has a kind of nostalgic feeling, loss of something something which was there in the past. It is pertinent to know the term elegy here because most of Arnold's poems are elegiac in tone, particularly his Dover Beach and the Scholar Gipsy are elegiac in tone. That means they mourns over the loss of something. Dover Beach, as we saw in the earlier videos, was a mourning over the loss of faith, whereas the Scholar Gipsy mourns over the loss of that imaginative spirit, which was something very core to the romantic principle or the theory of romanticism. Another interesting thing, the term in the title itself, that is gypsy. Gypsy are the people of Romania, Romanic, Roma or Romania. They are the nomadic people who travel from place to place. Originally, they have their origin in Asia, particularly in India also, because they are Indo-Aryan people. But they mostly live in Europe, and there are also diaspora populations in America. The Romania Roma sect group, gypsies, are known for their artistic and trade skills. In the poem, the Scholar Gypsy is about a scholar, an Oxford scholar, who went in search of knowledge of the gypsies. He was an Oxford student who left his studies at Oxford to join a band of gypsies in order to learn their secrets of trade, the skills of their art, all these things. The story is actually taken from or based upon a story written by Joseph Glanville in 17th century in his book Vanity of Dogmatizing, published in 1661. Based on the story of Joseph Glanville in the book The Vanity of Dogmatizing 1661, Arnold writes his The Scholar Gipsy after almost 2 centuries in 1853. So he finds that the example of the Scholar Gipsy is relevant to make a criticism of the Victorian life. In literary terms, I can say what T.S. Eliot says. Arnold finds his objective correlative through Scholar Gipsy to put his ideas of the Victorian society, put forth his ideas of Victorian society. When come to the structure of the poem is in 25 stanzas of 10 lines each. And the first two stanzas, particularly first 14 lines, like a sonnet, first 14 lines or first two stanzas, they describe the nature, particularly pastoral atmosphere. The poem is a pastoral, is in the pastoral setting too, set in the Oxford countryside, in the south part of England, the English south, the south of England. And the next part where the poet has got the book of Joseph Glanville's and he opens that story reading, and then he goes back to the story of Joseph Glanville and recalls that the story of Scholar Gipsy. That's how the structure of the poem is made, written in the way that it opens with the spirit of romanticism, describing the beauty of nature, and it continues the same spirit with the story of the past, taking a source, taking the source from Joseph Glanville's poem, story. Let's come to the first stanza, discussion of the first stanza. The first stanza opens with the description of the rustic beauty. We see the very first lines say, "Go, for they call you shepherd from the hill. Go, shepherd, and untie the wattled coats. No longer, coaches, right? No longer leave thy wistful flock unfed, nor let thy bawling fellows rack their throats." So the description of the pastoral world, which is full of rural natural beauty, that is the opening of the poem. There you see the country side of Oxford lies in a distance from that of Oxford. So therefore, the poem opens in the rustic beauty of pastoral setting with Oxford lying in a distant place. It makes the description of the land, which is beautified by the natural beauty. You see, nature around is so beautiful. We see the way the lambs, the sheep, they are grazing there, where he gives a call for the shepherds to untie the sheep so that they can go to the fields and graze freely. So, and the description of the shepherds is also there in the opening. A call is given to the shepherds to begin the quest for begin the quest for the scholar's gypsy. So, the beautiful description of the nature, and in the middle of that, the poet calls for the shepherds to go in search of the scholar gypsy. So, it's a kind of quest for something, the search for the beauty there, the search for the lost spirit of imagination, maybe, right? Like that, he gives a call for that search. And he tells them to let the flock of sheep free so that they can readily they can be free to graze in the field, and the scholars the shepherds will become free to go for the search of that scholar gypsy. So the first stanza of the poem opens with a kind of quest for something, search for something, and it introduces the beautiful pastoral world, and it contrasts with the world of the Victorian society that was full of materialism and aftermath of industrialization made it so. And therefore, the author is trying to contrast the beautiful world of pastoral, natural world of pasture, because the very pastor is a word from the Latin word pastor, means Latin root word pastor means shepherd. That means that beautiful ambience of the pastoral society or pastoral world is taken here in order to contrast that world with that of the materialistic and a very disturbed society of the Victorian age, which Arnold perceives through this poem. As the poem proceeds, in the second stanza, we see there is a reference to a farmer who is reaping corn. So, that farmer reaping the corn, who hangs up his coat on the branch of a tree, and he returns to, or he comes to a place to have his food. He places his basket pitcher nearby, and then he started eating. Right? He left his sickle also. He was working in the field. He left his sickle, the one he used for cutting that corn, and then reaping the corn. Right? And came to eat his lunch. Here you find the very picture, a vision or an image of the farmer, and the way he reaps or the way he takes the break is a kind of picture of the very rural atmosphere, the landscape of the Oxford countryside. So again, when he come back to the lunch, there he heard the bleating of the flocks in the distance. The very rural elements are taken here to beautify description of the nature. A typical summer day, it was a typical summer day with all its activities and noises. But in such a summer day, the activities, the noises of the rural side, that actually, the sounds of the rural side, that has beautified the surrounding. It was a, rather it's a nice, we can say, the beautiful music of the natural elements, the birds or the sheep, that actually made the scene beautiful. Thus, Arnold creates in the second stanza also a rustic scene which is elaborated from the first stanza, and it is elaborated further with the description of the reapers working in the fields. So, you see, in the first stanza, it was a description of the nature surrounding the place, and in the second stanza, we enter the description of a land where a farmer reaping corn. When we come to the third stanza, he, Arnold, appreciates the toil of the shepherds, because who work till the sunset, who starts their work in the morning, sunrise, till sunset in the hilltops. Yeah, they work in the hilltops, right? So he appreciates that toil, a day-long toil of the shepherds who work, and then he finds himself within them, lying somewhere under the shade of a tree. The tall green grasses are seen there, lowing stacks are there. So amidst of such a beautiful atmosphere, the poet finds himself one among them. Somewhere we are hinted here that imaginative spirit of the romantics is lost for some time, but it is there here. It was started probably in the 1660s, we see, with the time when William Blake and others started writing in English. That was full of imaginations, right? Poetry of imagination, written around, it reached its peak in towards the end of 18th century with the with the publications of Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, Shelley, Keats, and others. So that kind of imagination is probably even represented through the example of the scholar Gipsy. He finds himself there, he imagines himself there amidst of all that beautiful atmosphere, and he he's there in that spot to wait for the or search for the uh, lost scholar, that is the gypsy scholar. Then he enjoys the fragrance of the blooms of linden trees. There were linden trees, a variety of fragrant trees. He was enjoying the blooms. It was in full bloom, flowers, right? And amidst of lovely pastures and flowers, he has Granville's book with him. Yeah. Then he comes to the present here, right? In his hand, he has Glanville's Glanvill's book with him. Who is this Glanville? Joseph Glanville, who wrote that a book named the book which provided the source for this book is The Vanity of Dogmatizing, published in 1661. Joseph Glanville's book is with Arnold, and he opens that book. There he finds a kind of a link to the story of that the scholar Gipsy. He moves to the description of the scholar Gipsy from the description of the nature through the example of through the through the act of opening this book. He reads the story of that poor Oxford student there who left his friends and the college to learn the gypsy lore, the art of gypsies. That is stated in the third and fourth stanzas. When we come to the fifth stanza, two of his friends met Scholar Gipsy years later. He wasn't there for so many times. He wasn't visible. He wasn't there. But it is said that, yeah, of course, not just. Two of his friends met Scholar Gipsy years later. They asked him about his way of life with gypsies. But Scholar Gipsy answered them that his gypsy friends had some arts, some rules, and that they could control the brain of the people. It was a kind of magical power, a kind of imaginative spirit, something which was lost with the advent of science and advent of materialism. And Arnold is trying to recall that lost spirit of imagination through the example of these gypsy scholars. And the gypsy scholars had all these things, and he goes in search of that. And the scholar Gipsy goes in search of that gypsy scholars, and he wants to learn those artistic skills, arts, and their trade secrets also. And he assures his friends that he would teach the world everything after learning all the secrets from them, that arts of the gypsies. And he finds time and blessings of God as two things needed for his achievement. You also see in Arnold there is always some kind of moralizing. He therefore demands time, along with that the blessings of God, as the two things needed for achieving that learning of skills of gypsies. Then he goes ahead. The lost scholar Gipsy was never seen once he had left his friends. That means when we take that scholar Gipsy as an allusion, a kind of metaphor for the lost imaginative spirit also, the spirit of imagination which was there once upon a time in the Romantic age was lost for some time, in his opinion, due to the advent of the industrialization and its impact of people and the production of materialistic culture. Therefore, he's trying to recall that lost spirit through an objective correlative of the scholar Gipsy. So he was not seen for some time. But rumors are there that he was occasionally seen while wandering in the countryside. People say he was thoughtful and less spoken, but he wore strange clothes, not unlike those of gypsies. Yeah, there are rumors. No one has exact idea where he was. And some shepherds say they had met him on the hills of Hurst in the spring. Yeah, it was in the spring season. They saw him in the hills, and the villagers in the long overcoats had found him sitting at their entering by the warm fireplace. They found him in the warm fireplace also. Like that, here and there, the presence of scholar Gipsy was expressed, but no one had any clarity that where exactly scholar Gipsy was there. And come to the next stanza. The disappearance and the peculiar behavior of Scholar Gypsy is further elaborated. Scholar Gypsy would disappear in the middle of the drink or talk. He takes his drink or talk and he disappears in the middle. Knowing him, the poet draws a picture of him because the poet knew who was Scholar Gypsy by reading this. And keeping that in mind, he draws a picture of him and put the shepherds to follow the Scholar Gypsy. He gives that to the shepherds to follow the Scholar Gypsy, as the boys in the wheat fields if they had seen him. So he was in search of that Scholar Gypsy, right? Therefore, he asked the boys in the wheat fields if they had seen him lying in his boat, and Arnold describes the scenery with its wide grass meadows and the green hills. He wonders if the Scholar Gypsy has ever visited these lovely and quiet places. Thus, you find that the story here makes a kind of quest or search for Scholar Gypsy. Then he continues the discussion of the peculiarities of Scholar Gypsy. He loved lonely places. He used to rest in a wooden boat on summer nights. He was found near the Oxford ferryboat station where riders cross the small Thames River. And as the boats move with the wind, he is seen dreaming in a boat, leaning backward in a thoughtful way. These are some of the ways he describes the peculiar behavior of Scholar Gypsy. And he also picked some flowers, with the flowers picked in the lonely fields, right? And his eyes staring at the moonlit stream. Likewise, he places Scholar Gypsy in a very natural beauty and describes the peculiar behavior of Scholar Gypsy. And if you take that Scholar Gypsy as something which is a spirit of imagination again, that is something which is found in all those natural places where the poets get inspiration. So Arnold is trying to say that through the example of Scholar Gypsy, that lost spirit of imagination. So then he continues with the description of Scholar Gypsy in particular, his further peculiar behavior, and we will discuss that in the next part. But till now, you find that Mathew Arnold's poetic genius is well expressed through various poetic elements used in the poem The Scholar Gypsy, and the poem continues the romantic tradition of the poetry through its description of Scholar Gypsy in a rustic setting. The romantic spirit of the earlier romantic era continues through the Arnold's poem because he gives due scope for individualism by describing the Scholar Gypsy, and along with the description of Scholar Gypsy, he makes an attempt to describe the natural setting surrounding him. Thus, the poem has this continuity of spirit of romanticism as well. Anyhow, we will see the way it continues in the next part. Thank you for listening.